Here is the man on the pole for today's race for the 47th time in his career, Ayrton Senna. It's all McLaren, in fact, on the front row because beside him is Gerhard Berger. So confident of their Friday times, they didn't even bother to set fast times on Saturday. Worked on race conditions. In row 2, it is Alain Prost in his Ferrari, the man leading the point standings. Beside him, his teammate, Nigel Mansell in the other Ferrari. More confident of his race setup, but still confident the McLarens have the better deal. In row 3, it is Riccardo Patrese in the Williams-Renault. Happy to be there. Moved up quite a bit, as did his teammate on Williams-Renault, Thierry Boutsen. Both men improving greatly on their Saturday times over Friday. Row 4 is the three-time world champion, Nelson Piquet, the man who had his first start here in '78. Beside him is Jean Alesi of the Tyrrell Ford team. In row 5, Alessandro Nannini on the Benetton team, man who just recently gave up caffeine. Beside him, Ivan Capelli in the Leighton House Judd, a man who's been doing quite a bit. In row 6, Aguri Suzuki with the LaRousse Lamborghini. And in fact, after their great showing in the last race, they've done a wonderful showing qualifying here. There's Eric Bernard, his teammate. The other Tyrrell Ford, Satoru Nakajima, qualified in the 13th position in row 7. Beside him is Mauricio Gugelmin in the Leighton House Judd. Pierluigi Martini in the Minardi, the only Minardi to make the field this week. And beside him, you'll find the Lotus of Derek Warwick. In row 9, the fastest qualifying Brad and Stefano Modena. The footwork arrow is beside him of Alex Cafe. The other footwork car is in row 10, Michele Alboreto. Beside him is the other Camel Lotus Lamborghini, Martin Donnelly. In row 11, David Bravo. Sitting beside him in the Ligier is Nicola Larini. Emanuele Pirro in the Dallara, next to Philippe Alliot. And in the final row for today's race, both Monteverdes, J.J. Leto and Gregor Foytek. These are the cars who did not qualify for today's race, and the drivers: Olivier Grouillard in the Osella, Paolo Barilla in the Minardi, Yannick Dalmas in the AGS, and for the first time this year, Andrea De Cesaris in the Dallara. Here's the cars who did not survive pre-qualifying on Friday morning, that one-hour session. Gabriele Tarquini in the AGS, Roberto Moreno in the Eurobrun, Bertrand Gachot in the Coloni, Claudio Lange in the other Eurobrun, and Bruno Giacomelli with the Life Team. We'll be back in just a moment for the start of today's German Grand Prix from Hockenheim. Don't go away. Cloudy skies, 80% humidity, and they say there's a 30% chance of a thunder shower sometime this afternoon. The wind about 10 miles an hour or so coming across the front straightaway. This is a very interesting track. In fact, it's almost two tracks in one. Is that not right, Jonathan?
Yes, that's right. If we look at a plan of the circuit here, we'll see that we get the tight, twisty section by that checkered flag on the left-hand side of the picture. That's all very twisty. We've got grandstands all the way around there. Most of the spectators are situated in that stadium area. The rest of the circuit, all 3 miles of it, just runs out the back, as we can see in the corner picture, through the woodland. Maximum speeds of 200 miles per hour reached here. And in fact, it's really just 3 miles of straight, interrupted by just 3 chicanes.
And then we also have those chicanes, which do quite a bit. Great views from the in-cars today. Two teams. We have both the Benetton team and the Lotus cars, which we'll be carrying. There's one of them that you can see. That's Nelson Piquet aboard the Benetton that we can see right now. And there's the other one. There we're riding with Derek Warwick in the Lotus. John Visignano's got an update on the status of things down in the pits.
Actually, Rick, there's a great deal of work being done on the grid, a little bit more than usual. We had Alain Prost. He is in the T car. That's the spare car. He has the engine and the gearbox out of his race car. They swapped them over after this morning's warm-up, if you can believe that. His teammate, Nigel Mansell, looked very worried. They were working a little bit on the gearbox there. Thierry Boutsen all over that car's electrics and the Williams. Everything with his teammate, Patrese, seemed okay. And Ayrton Senna on pole position. They were all over that car's electrics. Again, they seemed very concerned about the electrical situation on that Honda engine. Berger is okay. Poor Michele Alboreto, the fire extinguisher went off in his race car. He is in the T car, just straight out of the pits into the T car. That has to be unsettling. And somewhat of an Italian job with the Minardi. of martini. They are strapping an ice bag to the fuel injection. Let's hope that makes it all the way around for this entire Grand Prix. It's going to be interesting.
Well, in fact, it's one of the interesting things about it is just how warm it is. As I mentioned, yesterday and Friday, I am downright hot here. I live in Phoenix, and I can say it was hot here. Today, because of a little bit of cloud cover, not quite as bad. The intriguing thing about this track, though, is it's so darn long. You're looking at a track that's over 4 miles, and especially when you look at those tires, it's a chance for a lot of heat to get generated.
Yeah, it seems somewhat ironic here that in ambient temperatures of 90, 100 degrees, these guys are still having to heat up their tires, and this weaving around they're doing, they need to see about 160 degrees, 170 degrees in that rubber for it to really grip well.
On the other hand, the Williams team was having problems on Friday, especially with their tires. They did not have quite the balance that the car needed. As a result, they were going out and scrubbing up too much on the tires because of some oversteer problems. And by the time they were getting back to the pits, their tires were showing 240 degrees, which meant out on the track they were probably hitting 270, which is way too much to be running a race track.
Well, that's right. The optimum temperatures around about 170, 190 degrees perhaps of these tires. Any more than that, certainly 240, they're in deep trouble. And in qualifying, when they've just got one lap to do, and therefore one lap sticky tires, the unfortunate thing is that twisty stadium section is right at the end of that lap, when the tires are in their worst configuration. And there actually we can see in Ayrton Senna's car a new sort of windscreen. You see that black windscreen with its return coming forward. That's new for this race, undoubtedly, to try and reduce the amount of cockpit turbulence that can be quite a problem at 200 miles an hour. The car's now coming up to finally take their positions. The drivers on the front being a little bit concerned that the engines are going to be getting rather warm as they wait. They really do want those back-tail cars to get a bit of a hurry up and join the field.
And each car, you see them stall just a little bit as they come onto the grid. They sort of do a quick practice start, make sure all is well before they get up onto their grid position.
That's right. We saw one of the Lotuses there just have a bit of a squirt.
Okay, we have the final two cars on the grid, the two Monteverdis moving up into location. As you see the last Blue Jay, the two Monteverdis. Now, let's go ahead and listen in as we start the German Grand Prix. And we've got an accident right off the bat in the front. It looks like
a
Dallara in the back, a tire you saw flying up over the back. And it looks like either the Monteverde or one of the Ligets was involved in it also as well. Looks like there's the two Monteverdis.
That is, in fact, Pirro, because that's Pirro and Alio. Philippe Alio, the other Dallara contenders did not make the qualifying.
There you see the rest of the cars going around the circuit. Now the question is here, do you go ahead and stop the race?
I think it's unlikely. They should be able to move those cars. I don't think the Ligier was too badly damaged. They've got a reasonable amount of time. It's a long lap, and they really will not want to stop this motor race. They'll be getting the cranes out there just as fast as they can. But on the other hand, we are up against the pit wall there, and the entrance off the track could be some way away. Let's see if we can have another look. And it's Senna clearly in the lead. Senna's got the start he wanted. Berger's in second. Third, fourth on the Ferraris and the Williams cars. That's just the sort of start that the whole field really wanted.
Seems to set exactly the way you expected. You've got the McLarens in front, and you've got the Ferraris, then you have also the Williams. One other thing we want to mention about for that restart, this is a long circuit. They've got 4 miles to go around, which is going to give them a little extra chance to try and get those cars off.
That's right. They're still racing hard, and I would have thought by this time if they were going to stop the race, the red flags would be out, the black flags would be out around the circuit, the red flag on the start-finish line.
And you see Gerhard Berger going out just a little bit, although obviously he's still a ways back.
Yeah.
There's the front straightaway. You can see the Dallara of Manuel Pirro, who does not appear to have gotten out of the car yet.
The race will be stopped. The race will be stopped. They'll be getting the black flag surely now. They cannot compete unless they're going to give it yellow flags, but I'd be surprised.
Well, here we'll see as they come around as to what they're going to do. It would be possible to give them a yellow flag just for this corner and allow the race to continue. There you see yellow flags out, but at this point they are not stopping the race. They are continuing on as if they expect to go the distance here.
No, that's quite interesting. It seems that they've judged that the cars, as we can see, will be well offline. They will be right to the left-hand side of the track, and therefore they can resume the rescue activities then. It looks like Pirro's in some sort of discomfort there. In fact, Pirro, he's hit the wall in his back. He's hit the wall rear on. Pirro has had some problems in the past with some back injuries, with some back problems. And
Here we get another view of it. Here we get another view of it. There you see what happened was, it looks like Emmanuel Pirro moved up trying to get ahead on the grid and clipped the rear of the car that was ahead of him, throwing off his tire, spinning him off to the side, causing the one Ligier to go into him.
That's right. It looked as if that Ligier just got snagged on it, and a pretty hard impact into the back of the barrier there. We can see the rear, obviously the left rear's come off it. It's obviously hit the gearbox hard. And in fact, it was here, at Hockenheim last year when Pirro was driving for the Benetton team that he went off, again with some back problems, on the entry to the stadium section. And I think Pirro is somehow rather predisposed to having back problems. I think he has some sort of weak back.
So then obviously that is going to aggravate it. There we go back to our race situation. And once again, no surprise. You have both McLarens up front running 1-2. Then back behind them, you can see the Ferrari first of Alain Prost and then Nigel Mansell. And they are followed by the two Williams cars. It looks like the first Williams car is Riccardo Patrese, then Terry Boutsen. Then you have the two Benettons, first Nelson Piquet, then Alessandro Nannini you see right there, followed by Jean Alesi, and then it is the Leighton House cars coming up back behind. This is that section we call the stadium section, which is very intriguing for a racetrack. It's almost two separate racetracks. You come into this section, and this is where nearly 100,000 fans will crowd in, and this is where they sit. And there is almost no seating at all on the back section, which is the forest section. Now, as we see the cars start to come onto this is where they go back into that road section there. Once again, the accident we have, and you can see they've got a collar.
That's right. Pirro's got a collar on. And here we are. We're riding with Derek Warwick now. We're coming down to the corner to start the lap after the start-finish line. And Warwick's there. He's in fourth gear. He's probably going up to... No, he's back to sixth for now. And let's see if he can draft up on that car just ahead of him. He'll be approaching 190 miles an hour at this point. Perhaps 195. It doesn't look like he's quite close enough to have a go. As he comes into this second gear chicane, back down a second, hard on the brakes, 50 miles an hour through this one now, back on the power, third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear, sixth gear, and he's using about 13,000 revs with his Lamborghini V12 engine here. Into the second chicane, second gear once again. See then how he just nibbled the curb on the left side and the right. It's a very narrow entrance to that chicane, and you need to use a little bit of curb to get through there quickly enough. They're coming down now towards the third chicane. A quick flick on his hand to wipe off a rip-off off his visor. Back down to fourth gear. A little nibble of curb again, maybe. And speeding in the power. Fourth gear. Back to fifth. Back to sixth. Coming in now towards this stadium section of the track. Now just look how the scenery changes. Someone's got a bit of dust there. What is it? No, nothing too much. Uses a bit of curb on the exit. Second gear for the Sachs curve. It's got a bit of camber on this. It's reasonably fast for a second gear hairpin. Now that normally is flat out through that left-right, but he had a bit of a feather on the throttle there. Past the start-finish line, picking fifth gear before coming back down to the point at which we picked up the camera car, which is turn one on this Hockenheim circuit.
Derek Warwick, by the way, sitting in 13th position. The car that was directly ahead of him was Eric Renard, both the Lamborghinis. We go back up to our leaders with Ayrton Senna continuing to lead, followed by Gerhard Berger, the two Ferraris. We'll be back with more from the Grand Prix of Germany here at Hockenheim right after this. Somewhere between Frankfurt and Stuttgart, and you see the cars as they manage to work their way around the track. At the beginning of the race, there was the accident involving Emmanuel Pirro, and at one point they had him in a collar, had him out of the car. There was some concern for his condition. See if we can't get an update from John Bizignano down in the pits.
Rick, the situation with Pirro, they've loaded him into the ambulance and they are taking him to the medical center here. He was moving, he was talking, they had a neck brace on him. I think that was more caution than anything else. He says that he does have some back pains, but nothing absolutely accurate as far as his exact condition at this moment. His wife has joined him in the ambulance and they will be arriving at the medical center very soon, but he does look in fairly good shape. He's moving just about everything except that neck brace is restraining his head movement at this time.
With the race going about out as we expected. Both McLarens out in front, followed by the Ferraris, although we have had one change a little further back, and that is, as you see the cars come through, the next car that comes through is indeed one of the Williams cars, Ricardo Patrese, but apparently Terry Boutsen has fallen off quite a bit.
Yeah, we seem to have lost Boutsen. He was running right up there with Patrese. He then dropped back to 11th place with one particularly slow lap time. He lost about 6 seconds now. That sort of time loss could well come from a bit of a moment, perhaps running off on the grass. And we can see now the two McLarens, two Ferraris closely together. Really, these four looking like, once again, we're going to be in for a classic race.
This is the part of the track that Senna says he likes the most. He says it gives him a feeling of freedom when he leaves the stadium section and goes out into the forest, because once again, there are so few fans out there, so few stands, and you get out there and there is nothing but the trees and the race cars and an occasional flag marshal and the chicanes, but that feeling that you're out in the forest and you're racing the way you used to.
No, that's absolutely right. I raced here last year in the Grand Prix, and it's the nearest thing to actually driving a Grand Prix car on public roads, because as we can see, the surrounding scenery could just be that of a surrounding road in many instances. Now, we don't want to get too concerned here about the fact that we've got four cars running nose to tail. At the moment, they're probably just driving at about 98%, you know. Tyres are going to be a bit of a problem here. The track temperature is very hot. It's probably 130 degrees on that asphalt there. And these guys don't want to be pushing these cars too hard at this point. Otherwise, they're going to pay the price later on. And they are, I'm sure, going to try and go through this race without a pit stop, despite using the softer C-compound Goodyear tyres. So, you know, I would say that probably Mansell here could have a go at Prost ahead. Berger maybe could have a go at Senna if they really wanted to. But at the moment, I guess they're just happy to maintain a pretty good rate of progress there at the front of the field. No one wants to lose a lot, but no one's too concerned at getting in front of anybody at this stage.
Well, in fact, the word from Goodyear, they were hoping there was going to be enough cloud cover that the temperatures would drop, that the C compound would indeed be good for the entire race, and that was their recommendation to the teams that were using the C compound to go ahead and plan on using it the entire way. At the same time, it has heated up a bit since this morning. The clouds have broken a little bit more, and as a result, it's going to be a little bit warmer, and will they be able to go the whole way on those Cs?
Well, that's the question. McLaren, in fact, used the qualifying period yesterday, when, of course, it was a similar sort of time, very hot, to do some race car testing. They were so confident, they put race cars on, they ran full fuel. So you'd have to say that McLaren should be in the best shape to judge their race cars. Now we're running now with Nelson Piquet in the Benetton car.
Let's go down to John, a few quick thoughts on the tire situation.
Just to bring you up on what compounds are being used, Jonathan, as you said, the C compound with Goodyear is the most popular. Benetton and Leightonhouse are on the B compound. Alesi is on compound 88 Pirelli. That is the softer compound. All the other Pirelli cars are on 94 compound, which is a bit harder than the 88. They're going to try and go the distance, but as you said, it's hotter now than it has been all morning, and just as hot as it was earlier in the week when they were using tires left and right on this very long Hockenheim circuit. We're going to see some people in the pits.
A lot simply depends upon how good of a race it boils down to. If you're in a situation where you don't, as you said earlier, have to go head-to-head with somebody, your tires are going to last a lot longer.
Well, this is it. They're going to be trying to take things fairly easy at this point. We can see that Senna there is trying to find a way around Marini. He won't have been too impressed that he couldn't get through before. Now Berger will equally be pretty annoyed. And that's lost him 0.3 of a second, having to go around the outside of the Ligier there, when the driver could have pulled over before he entered that stadium section. A little bit of daylight there for Senna ahead of Berger. He won't mind that. But on the other hand, I'm sure that he won't be too concerned that Berger's going to be trying to come by him too much. What could be a problem, though, is if Prost starts to have a go at Berger. Again, with the sort of form we've seen, I think that's probably unlikely. See how these cars are able to use the exit of that bit of curve there as they run on out of turn one to the beginning of the long straight. Very important there to get the exit speed as high as possible, because whatever speed they carry out of that corner, they're going to be seeing at the end of this long straight as they come down towards that first chicane.
And it is that straight where they've been attaining speeds this weekend of over 200 miles an hour. 3 of the cars have done that. Berger, Prost, and Terry Boutsen, actually 4, and Senna as well, have all topped 200 miles an hour on that section of the course. Once again, that's the fastest speeds, top speed that we have seen in Formula One this year. Well, let's talk about the 2 chicanes that we've got here. 2 very different different things. Most of the drivers, when you talk about them, say right off the bat they do not like it.
No, well, that's right. We've got three quite different sorts of chicane at the moment. We've just seen number 2 chicane, which is the narrow one. It's the middle speed chicane. It's still second gear, the one where you need to clip the curves because it's so narrow to try and get through there at a reasonable pace. They're coming down now towards the 3rd chicane. Much faster, 3rd or even 4th gear. Perhaps going through there at about 120 miles an hour, maybe 120 miles an hour, I would think. Again, using a little bit of curve, the Ferraris clinging on well to the McLarens there, but perhaps drawing away now from Prix in that 5th spot, with Piquet and Nannini bringing the Benettons in behind, with Boutsen now having recovered from whatever moment it was to bring him up to 8th place. Capelli in 9th and Alain in 10th place, the top runner on Pirelli tyres.
So far, no surprises here at the Grand Prix of Germany here at Hockenheim as we see Ayrton Senna continue to lead this race. We'll be back with more, though, right after this. Well, you're a fellow Brit, simply from a nationalistic standpoint. It must be sad to see Nigel deciding to make that announcement.
Well, it will be. You know, Nigel's been the kingpin of British Formula One racing for some time now. His style has become a great hallmark, you know, a real fighter. He really does try every lap of every race he does, and that sort of style is relatively unusual. Of course, it can sometimes be that he certainly demands more of his equipment than perhaps drivers who are a little bit easier on his cars, but then he does push the whole time.
And as Alain Prost mentioned that he felt he was going to end up in a situation doing more of the testing, it's already began to happen. As a matter of fact, when the team came here to test at Hockenheim before the race, Nigel Mansell was off in Australia for a golf tournament. So right off the bat, they're already in the situation, at watching a golf tournament, right off the bat, they're in that situation where some of the weight is already being shifted to his shoulders so that Alain Prost is having to carry the team. Now, Nigel Mansell did make the point in an interview yesterday. We were talking with him, and he said that it is one of his efforts now is to try and make sure that Alain Prost can indeed win the World Championship. And in fact, he talked about during qualifying, working a situation where he was able to give Alain Prost a tow on Friday to help increase his lap time just a little bit more. So the plan, at least, is to help win the World Championship.
Yeah, I think we're going to see quite a lot of cooperation between these two Ferrari drivers. Mansell, I think, is full of respect for Prost's abilities. And in fact, we've just seen now, we're on lap 10, and the pace is hotting up now. Senna has just set a new fastest race lap, 47.3. They were doing 48.0s 2-3 laps ago. So as the fuel load lightens, the pace is gradually coming down. We're going to get to the point in which the inevitable deterioration of tyre performance will probably balance out the increasing weight load coming off the car when lap times will bottom out. But we seem to be some way away from that now. The two Ferraris, the two McLarens, drawing away now from Prix. And we just saw one of the Benettons have a bit of a moment there. Yeah. Nelson Piquet had a bit of a moment. He missed one of the chicanes and lost a fair bit of ground. Here we are. We're seeing him now. It's the first chicane. He locks it under braking, goes through there. That will have lost him there. We may see some there. There is probably Boutsen there. He was behind Prix. That must be Boutsen in the other Williams going by. He's lost that place.
And now you'll see, very briefly, one of the turn marshals came out, removed the cone, and let him back out onto the track.
Yeah, maybe actually we saw a Benetton go by there, rather a Williams. That difficult to see who that one was.
Back on the course here as we see the McLarens go by, leading 1-2, then the Ferraris 3-4. You were talking about the lap times and the fact that Senna had just set the fastest lap a moment ago. Now Nigel Mansell has just set the fastest lap. That's a 1 minute and 47-second lap, but that is significantly slower than the times they qualified on. On Friday, Senna and Berger, now remember they're using qualifying tires, qualified about 7 seconds faster than that. But even this morning during the warm-up session, they were running 3 to 4 seconds faster than this.
Yeah, that's right. In qualifying, we had a 1 minute, nearly got under the 1 minute 40 with Senna, 1 minute 40.1. Of course, the cars had these very sticky qualifying tires, probably worth 2 or 3 seconds a lap over a race tire. And of course, the difference of running these cars with empty fuel tanks. I mean, when they qualify, they have just enough fuel for one hard lap and a slow in lap and a slow out lap. I mean, that's about probably 7 gallons. Now they're having to start this race with 45 gallons of fuel. And that amount of weight in the car slows them down by about 3 seconds a lap.
On this track as well, it being so long, over 4 miles, some of the teams were having a problem using qualifying tires. They simply would not not last an entire lap. They were getting through halfway or three-quarters of the way on a lap. It's not like some of the shorter tracks where they can get more out of the tires. So as a result, they were using what was called the D compound, which is technically a race compound, although very soft, and they were having to use that to try and get the qualifying times out. Let's get down to John Visigliano down in the pits.
Jonathan Palmer, there's a little bit of confusion down here in the pits with your old team. They have been giving Alisi the in sign for the last 6 or 7 laps, but he hasn't arrived in his pit. Who in the Tyrrell organization makes the last call, Jonathan? Is it the driver or the team management having the last call on when they will come into the pits for tires?
Well, that's a very good point, John. I mean, the problem is the guy who's eventually going to put his foot on the brakes and turn his steering wheel into the pit lane is going to be the driver. And if Alain doesn't wish to make a pit stop, or if indeed he hasn't seen the pit signals, been too busy racing, then that may well not happen. I'm surprised they're giving him the pit signal at the moment, because, you know, he's just said on his last lap, on lap 12, he's just said his fastest lap time of the race on a 49.5. You know, so it looks pretty unlikely that his Pirelli tyres are going off that much yet, that he really needs to come in for a second set. So I'm surprised to see that.
As we see the cars coming down, there is Alain Prost Ferrari, distinctive because of the little yellow tabs. In Formula One, so many of the cars, each team car looks alike. There's 2 of them out there. Sometimes they're difficult to differentiate. So as a result, a few of the teams have started doing something like this. You see the little yellow tabs on Prost's car. Nigel Mansell's car, it doesn't have that. It's a little quicker to spot as a result. This section in here, do you try and give away this? When you're setting up a car, you've got the stadium section, totally different than the rest of the track. You've got to worry about that top speed elsewhere. Do you give away this section of the track?
Well, you don't really. It's a real compromise, you see. You look at the size wings those cars are running. They are very tiny wings. You know, you've got 2 completely different sets of requirements here. We've got the section that they've just started now. We're running now with PK. Let's see if we can follow it around. Now, we're finishing this stadium section. We've got this 130 miles an hour right-hand corner here, 4th gear coming out. Now he's getting onto this fast section, the out-the-back section, through the forest, these 3 miles of straight, interrupted by the 3 chicanes. And for this part of the track, these cars need the minimum amount of downforce. The wings would be virtually taken off if it was not for the stadium section of the circuit. These cars will be doing about 200 miles an hour with the wing settings they have. If, for example, they were to run the wing settings that they would have at, say, Monaco, a very tight, twisty circuit, the amount of extra drag or wind resistance that would result would limit the speed, the car's top speed, to perhaps 175 miles an hour. You know, these cars would lose 25 miles an hour. Now, the other side of it is that we're going through the second chicane here. Let's see if he uses any curve. Yeah, a little nudge on each, back on the power, 3rd gear. Now, as he comes down towards the stadium section, we're now heading back towards the stadium section. We've got this 3rd, 4th gear chicane just about to come up. But if one was setting a car up purely for the stadium section, you would have a whole stack of wing on it. It's one big series of corners, clearly. Now, in the end, although the stadium's important, it's a lesser amount of the circuit, and what's more, you can't actually overtake anybody on the stadium section. And if you ran too much wing here, even if the lap time was similar to the lap time that you do with less wing, you wouldn't get by people on the straights, and that's the only place you can do it. And more importantly, people would also be able to overtake you. You could be very much a sitting duck, and that you can't afford to be. Here we are in the stadium section, you see. We've gone around the hairpin, we've gone the left, through the left, right, a dab on the brake, through this descending, then over the brow right-hander there.
Okay, back up front with the leaders. The 2 McLarens continue to lead. It hasn't changed much up front, a little changing through the middle, but more racing yet to come from Hockenheim, Germany. Don't go away. We are back here in Germany. Gerhard Berger in the pits. Let's go down to John Visigliano.
Both Gerhard Berger and the Ferrari of Alain Prost are in the pits, and they are having trouble with those tires. They can't make those tires live. I see blisters on the rears. We will get an exact update very soon. We have the second Ferrari coming in. Nigel Mansell arrives at the pit. The crew was not ready for him. He's headed right for the garage. He's headed right for my legs. Where he's headed, he definitely has a big problem. Nigel Mansell came streaking in to an absolutely full pit. He could have clipped several people, but everyone got out of the way. He is in the garage and out of the Grand Prix.
And just that fast, we've had some major changes in the race. How dare we go away for a commercial break? Nigel Mansell apparently with some kind of problem. Let's take a look. Here's what happened out on the track. We see there's Nigel Mansell going a little wide, doing damage to the undertray, skidding off the track, and apparently going no further than that, enough to damage the undertray and end his day?
Well, I don't know.
Or was there something that caused him to go off?
Yeah, my feeling is that was on the exit of the second chicane there. I think he lost some oil. I think we saw some flame out of the back. That was too much to be from grounding. That was from a fire. I think there was an oil leak. I think the engine has caused a problem. Maybe the gearbox, there was a mechanical problem. That put oil on the track. That caused him to go off the road. And we saw that cloud of dust. He then eased it back on the track and out of retirement. What was really interesting there was to see a pit stop from Alain and from Gerhard Berger for tyres. Now, these people did really hope to go through on one set of tyres. Maybe Senna's trying to do that. I've been watching the lap times, and they have not been falling off particularly. So what they could be doing is really more, rather an early sort of protective tyre stop to put a new set on. We've only done 15 laps out of 45, but of course the actual strain on the tyres is at its greatest in those opening laps because the fuel load is at its highest, and that's the reason that these guys don't pit just in the middle of a 45 lap race. If they were to pit, say, at lap 22, then if they would pit at lap 22 out of 45, then they wouldn't get the most advantage out of the second set, and they'd be limping along too long on a rather worn-out first set. So, it could be part of a tactical decision there. We'll have to wait and see whether or not Senna is going to try and stay out on one set the whole time, or whether he's going to be in for a pit stop shortly too. I think if he doesn't stop in the next 3 or 4 laps, we can assume that he's going to try and run all the way through.
Is it a case of hedging your bet, where you're sitting there saying, bring one car in early, play it, or you can see the team is set up for Ayrton Senna? Now the question is, are they waiting for him to make that decision?
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, one of the advantages that happens, one of the reasons that teams don't necessarily commit to doing the same thing, is that when they have a look at those tyres of Berger's, they can see what state they're in. They can see what the wear's like, what the conditions like, and they can make that'll give them more information to make a better judgment as to whether or not they suggest or bring Senna in. Now, as I said, if he's going to come in, I think he's going to have to do it in the next 2 or 3 laps if it's going to be really worthwhile. Clearly, the team are all ready. But you see, if he gets to more than 5 laps, then if he subsequently has to make a pit stop, he won't have made the full best use. Yes, and he's coming in.
Here goes John Bisignano.
Everyone is set in the McLaren pits. The perfect boys from McLaren wanting a 7 to 9 second pit stop. Ayrton Senna coming in, locking up the brakes. My gosh, his right front is totally blistered. A big line down the center of that. A little bit of hesitation on the left rear. Very quick pit stop. Everyone here extremely happy. Trying to get a look at these tires before Goodyear grabs them away. They are very worn on the inside edges, Jonathan.
Senna had about a 15-second lead over Nannini, and it looked like Nannini's going by right there.
Now, that was an excellent pit stop, and Senna will be by Nannini even as he comes into this first chicane, I am quite sure. The tyres will be hot. The teams will have had them in the blanket, so he will not be losing any grip straight away, and he can come... No, he's going to take it a little bit easy. Nannini there braking very hard. See the car wriggle around. Now, in fact, John, I'm sorry to correct you on that, but I don't think those tyres were blistered. What you were seeing on that right-hand front tyre, and yes, I agree, there was a black band around it, was what we call build-up. You get some extra rubber coming on it, and that gives an impression of a black band around. But, if any side was going to be blistered, it would probably be the highly loaded left rear. But nevertheless, there's no doubt that they felt that those tyres should be changed.
Now, this is the situation in the race as we have it. Alessandro Nannini is now in the lead, followed immediately behind by Ayrton Senna. Then you have Riccardo Patrese. It looks like Nelson Piquet back in the 4th location. And then Gerhard Berger, after his pit stop, is in the 5th spot. After his pit stop, Alain Prost has dropped back to the 7th location. Now the question comes down to talk about the tires on those 2 Benetton cars, the Benetton car and the Williams-Renault. How long can they last? Are they having the same problems?
Well, that'll be an interesting thing that we're going to have to watch out for. Again, there may be an element of tactical decision to keep the cars out for longer from the Williams' part. They may try and run through, but Williams is normally, they tend to be fairly hard on tyres, harder perhaps than certainly Ferrari, so I would think we're going to see a pit stop from the Williams too. But what's interesting from this is that we believe the McLarens and Ferraris were on the softer C compound. John down in the pits told us that he thought, I think it was the March team and maybe the Benetton, I forget now, were on the harder B compound, and they may very well have an advantage now at this stage. They may well be able to run through. And having said that, you know, looking at where Senna is relative to those Benettons, those McLaren pit stops were very good indeed. They've lost minimal time. And
especially when you remember you've got to slow down and then speed up to get in and out of the pit, plus the time you spend in the pit.
That's exactly right. Although we only see the car, we think a pit stop of being 7 or 8 seconds stopped against the watch. It actually takes about 30 seconds. 30 seconds time is lost overall with that slow entry to the pits and that not so slow exit from the pits, but it still all takes up time compared to running normally. We're looking at Berger having a go at, that must be Piquet there in the second Benetton.
Now, why has not, there you see Nannini clipping the curve quite a bit, why has not Senna moved on Nannini?
Well, that does surprise me there. We're looking at something quite interesting here. Now, why he hasn't closed up, I don't know, and it looks like Senna could be in some sort of a problem because we have got one of the Williams cars closing on him, and Nannini's on the original set, Senna's on a fresh set. He really should be right up on him. I think we may have a problem for Senna.
Especially on a straight line situation. We're not talking about the heavy curve. This is where, if anything, the McLaren should simply be able to pull ahead.
It may be that those new tires on Senna's McLaren have taken a little bit of a while to come in, but I find that surprising, you know. I mean, they will be warm. Even on the straights, the cars get heat into them because these cars are obviously continually subjected to the downforce. At about 200 miles an hour, they're probably looking at close on 2 tons effective weight as opposed to half a ton in the pits.
Did they switch over to the B compound? They came in so early.
And we have a Williams coming in. John, are you down in the pits for a Williams?
We are in the pits, and everyone is absolutely set. I think we are looking for Patrese to be on his way through the stadium and into the pit lane. Riccardo Patrese from Italy brings the Williams into the stopping area. A little bit of trouble on the left rear, but going very quickly. Engine revving very highly. Patrese keeping those RPMs up. My gosh, he blew my shirt off when he took out of here. But that was a very quick stop. Jonathan, on that right front, there was a huge flat spot. I don't know if you saw it, but there had to be a heck of a bunch of smoke coming out of Senna's tire on that right front. The flat spot was huge and had gone all the way down several layers of rubber.
That was on Senna's right front, John, is that right?
Absolutely. Senna's right front, a huge flat spot. There's no way he could have stayed out there. The imbalance of that flat spot on the tire would have been very disruptive.
Well, that's interesting. That suggests that Senna, obviously, you only get a flat spot from locking a wheel under braking. There's no amount of cornering does that. That's from locking a wheel under braking. And it's surprising that Senna should have had to have been in a situation of braking that hard. After all, he was leading. He didn't need to outbrake anybody. So to have that happen, this really is going to be a hard race on tires. And tires is probably going to win this race.
Now we dive into the car of Nelson Piquet, and right behind Nelson Piquet is Gerhard Berger, who has already been making a few moves off to the side, trying to get by. Where is the best place? There's a lot of places that pass on this track. Where, if you're given your druthers, where would you rather do it?
Well, that's absolutely right. This track is not hard to overtake on. One of the great strengths of those long straights, and you can draft up behind and get a good run to come alongside into generally this first chicane. As we follow PK round, we're coming around to the start-finish straight here into turn 1, and as we come out of turn 1, going up that next long straight, that's really when, if Berger's going to have a go, he crossed the line 0.8 of a second behind, he's probably too far back to have a go. I doubt it. Yes, I think that is too far. I think they're still too far back. And Senna, you know, what's interesting here is that Senna is only just now, he's just gone 0.3 of a second quicker than Nannini, but Nannini is still very much on the pace despite being on his original set of tires.
And we have to move off the pace for just a moment to head back, but we will be here in Germany, so don't go away. Come back to Hockenheim. Everybody has a different formula for coming up with that magic helmet design. Back in the lead situation there, you see Alessandro Nannini continuing to lead, but Ayrton Senna looks like he's ready to make his move.
Yeah, he certainly does. I think we shouldn't underestimate the power of the Ford engine in that Benetton. They've got the latest spec of the new Ford V8. And whilst it might not have the magical number 10 or 12 after the V, that Ford V8 is very powerful, make no mistake. And I think this performance that it's showing here is really quite demonstrative of that. Senna's just made a new fastest lap, 46.3, clearly now getting the best out of those tyres. They obviously took a little bit of a while to come on strong. That's Pierluigi Martini in the Minardi car, who's pulled off. He was not really in the running. I think he was running about 13th to 14th, maybe somewhere around there at the time. So he's not going to make a lot of difference to any ultimate race result there. But we should be looking at Senna. It'd be nice to see Senna now. He's got to be having a go at Nannini soon.
This is the new Series 4 engine that Ford has come out. They debuted it back at Silverstone, although they really were not in force. They didn't have enough engines to truly go the whole weekend. This weekend they came out with full force. They have 6 of the Series 4 engines, and they were well prepared to do battle and to run it at full tilt. And as you mentioned, it's getting a lot more power out of that Ford engine than they've ever gotten before. It still comes back to, are they going to have to pit for those tires? And how long?
I just don't know. I would have thought so, you know. I mean, but if Benetton, if they've opted for these harder B compound tires, and the fact that they haven't done so by now, I think they may try and run through.
Let's see if John knows the answer to this one. John, you down there?
Well, hopes are high in Benetton that they can go the whole way. They did choose the harder compound B type of Goodyear's mix, and they hope they can go the whole way. But Jonathan, towards the end of this race, those Bs cannot be as sticky as a second set of Cs. He's going to be losing ground here soon, don't you think?
Well, I do think that is highly likely. It just may be, they may be gambling on the fact that the B is that much harder than the C, but the Cs that the other teams, and particularly, of course, McLaren are running, it just may be that they think those Cs are going to be in worse shape, even their second set at the end, than the Bs, than the original set of Bs on the Benettons. And whilst we're talking about Bs, and cars running harder tyres, let's not forget that Ivan Capelli in the Leighton House car did a superb job for the last 2 Grand Prix. He led at Paul Ricard. He was running second at Silverstone, and he's already in an 8th place in this race here. And that car is one that we ought to keep tabs on, I think, Rick, throughout the race here.
And also, we have to mention that at Paul Ricard, it was his decision to go with the harder tire and go the whole way that enabled him to have such a good finish. But once again, it looks like Ayrton Senna is already planning out the move, already setting him up as he goes into those chicanes to try and figure out just which chicane he will make his move on to make that move. But it's intriguing. You know, we heard so much about how McLarens had come to this racetrack with more power because they were fully prepared to do battle with the rest of the season. There have been some complaints that perhaps Ferrari, as Ayrton Senna mentioned in the beginning of the broadcast, that Ferrari has been making bigger strides. Ron Dennis, on the other hand, there you see one of the Monteverdes, apparently, it must be J.T. Leto on the outside. Ron Dennis had made the comment this weekend, and it looks like one of the Benettons, Nelson Piquet,
that is Nelson Piquet, who looks like an engine for Nelson Piquet there. Cloud of smoke from that. What's interesting here is that, you know, Senna is right behind Nannini. He's right in the slipstream, and yet he's still struggling to try and come alongside, which can only mean that, yes, there is Piquet. He's pulling off now. He's pulling off. That can only mean that really that Benetton has got that Ford V8 is very powerful. The car is obviously clearly very fast in a straight line. And let's see how they compare going through the stadium section here. Now this is, it may be that Benetton are running less downforce, less wing on the car, which helps them on the straight, but makes them a little bit slower around the stadium. As we look at it, yes, Senna is a little bit quicker through those last 2 right-hand turns, but don't forget he's on fresh rubber. Look at all the little bits of rubber on the left-hand side of the picture here. All that rubber coming off the tyres of other cars, and you've got to be careful as a driver not to get on that rubber. We call it the marbles, because one run on that for 20 or 30 yards will overtake a lap another car, and you'll spend half a lap losing 3 seconds getting that rubbish off the tyres. And still Nannini holds off. You know, Senna really is not looking he's not looking terribly strong at this stage. I'm sure he is going to get by that Benetton, but it's quite surprising he's taking so long to do it.
And it doesn't look like Nannini's actually doing any blocking. It's simply a case of there's not able to get by. Let's go down to John.
Satoru Nakajima has arrived in the Tyrrell pit. They thought it was going to be for tires only until he arrived here coasting. The engine turned off. They have removed the rear bonnet of the car, the engine cover, and they are working. To me, immediately it looks like the fuel injection system on the right-hand side of the car, there was no misfire because the engine was totally stopped. Satoru Nakajima having a bad day here in Germany. His teammate, Alesi, has also come in earlier. 4 tires, a very quick pit stop by the Tyrrell organization. He's back out on the track.
John Alesi, the subject of a lot of controversy this weekend. The question as to whether he had indeed already signed with Ferrari, whether indeed he already signed with Williams. We talk about the silly season where they start making the plans for next year. It's in such high gear that John Alesi, there you see That looks like Alain Prost finally getting past Terry Boutsen, moving up into the 4th position. But they are about 13 seconds back behind Gerhard Berger. Finish what I was saying, Alain had to hold a news conference on Friday afternoon just to make the announcement that he had made no announcement, to end the speculation that he had not signed with anybody. But the rumors are in such full force. Ken Terrell at the same time was saying he was confident that he was going to be getting back Jean Alesi for next year, but seems like it'll take a little more than what he's got.
Yeah, there's a replay there. Prost ducking out to go by Boutsen. Don't forget, Prost is on the new rubber. He should be going by. And that, as we said, will bring Prost up into 4th place. But we've just seen that a new fastest lap has been taken by Nannini. Still on his original set of B tires there, 46.288 for Nannini. Pulled out 1.5 seconds over Senna there. This really is quite interesting. Coming back to Jean Alesi. Alesi was my teammate at Tyrrell last year, so I know very well just how quick that guy is. You know, he really is very, very talented. But I think it does seem to be that his management of his business affairs off the track leaves a little bit to be desired. He seems to have been upsetting and confusing a few people on the way, and no one's quite sure whether or not he's signed for Tyrrell, for Williams, or for Ferrari.
You saw those emergency lights off to the side of the track just a moment ago. That was simply the truck that was pulling off to the side, the car of Nelson Piquet. There we go back with the leaders. Now at this point you've got Alessandro Nannini, who is leading the race by just a notch over Ayrton Senna. Then it is nearly 5 seconds back to Gerhard Berger, and it's another 15 seconds back to Alain Prost. Now here's one thing that a driver hates to see. You never want to be, you don't mind following the lead car, but you don't want to be following the emergency car. We'll be back with more from Germany right after this. Just about 20 kilometers south of Hockenheim. Back to racing here. Alessandro Nannini continues to lead, and it looks like he's stretching that gap out just a tad.
Yeah, this looks pretty interesting. He set another race fastest lap of 46.1. Perhaps worth considering here that clearly that Ford race got a lot of power. Clearly Nannini's driving well and the chassis is working well. But, you know, one of the advantages of having a V8 engine, and particularly Ford's V8 engine, is that it uses less fuel than the bigger V10 and particularly V12 engines of the Ferrari. And probably that Benetton came to the line with perhaps 5 or 7 gallons of fuel less in it than the Ferrari. And that can make quite a difference when you consider that every 20 pounds of weight with these cars costs something like 0.2 of a second. It's roughly 1/10 of a second per 10 pounds of weight. So the lighter they can make these cars, the faster they'll go. And the easier on their tires will be, so that whatever weight advantage you can have, that'll carry you through all the way through the race. And it'll only be in the last perhaps 5 laps when the weight difference from McLaren to Benetton will be negligible.
Alessandro Nannini seems to be working pretty hard. He is hitting a lot of those curves in full force.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting how much curbing these cars can do. Clearly the suspensions are very, very stiff. But, you know, when you look at the movement of the car up and down over the bumps, 2/3 of that movement actually comes from the squashing of the tires rather than the compressing of the springs. The tires are really the most important spring on the car.
So actually most of the movement isn't coming from all that suspension work. It's simply the tire, which is so critical in this whole, you've got the formula, you've got the car, you've got the driver, but then the tire itself is so critical as well.
Yeah, that's right. The tire really does absorb a lot of the bumps. Now, we can also look at the different types of suspension. When you look at that Benetton come towards us, you see those struts angling upwards and inwards. We can see them there angling upwards and inwards, which go up towards the spring and damper units in that nose, hence that rather unsightly bulge on top of the car.
And we're talking about the movement of the suspension. Here you're on board with Derek Warwick, and you can see exactly what we're talking about.
Just listen to that motor. We're running at about 13,500 RPM in that V12. Look to it, the kickback through the steering wheel. I mean, these cars are hard work to drive. Look at that fight. Down to second gear. Balancing the throttle. He doesn't want to get too much of a slide here, it'll ruin his tires. He's just delicately holding that throttle. Careful here too. And back past the start-finish straight. Look how tightly he's cramped in that cockpit. You can see why he needs that cutout in the steering wheel. You see how his steering wheel's got that inverted V to give a bit of leg space there.
As a matter of fact, we noticed on Martin Donnelly's car, Martin Donnelly does not use the cutout steering wheel. He uses a full rounded steering wheel. Derek Warwick, on the other hand, is one of the larger Grand Prix drivers, which these days are becoming a bit of a rarity.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Derek has actually slimmed down quite a lot, but he's still not as small as Donnelly, and that allows Donnelly to run a conventional sort of wheel there. There we're looking at the Ferrari. We were talking about the suspension struts on the Benetton, those angling inward struts known as push rods, transferring the wheel movement to the dampers. If we get a chance to see the front of a McLaren, they go about it a different way. They use pull rods, which means they angle inwards and downwards. See if you can spot the difference. The dampers in the McLaren, there we go. You can just see those angling inwards and downwards struts, pull rods on the McLaren. Now Boots is coming in. Let's go to John in the pits.
Terry Boutsen, the Belgian driver, is coming up the pit lane. McLaren boys have moved out of the way, and the Williams team is ready. A little bit less RPM with Terry. They're trying to keep the engine very much alive. 4 tires off and 4 tires back on. A little bit of trouble with the left rear. They had to grab another wheel nut there. Boutsen looking in that left rear mirror saying, come on, fellas, I'm dying in here. Get me back out there. Terry Boutsen, this is agonizing to him. You can imagine just doing 200 miles an hour and now being absolutely dead stop. A big, big problem on the left rear. Now we have the right brakes looking very hard. Terry Boutsen so frustrated that he almost killed the engine and leaving the pit lane. Again, a lot of rubber on these tires and some blistering on the corners. Not using them up, but he's back on the circuit.
And in fact, Williams has had some problem all season long with their pit stops. They tried practicing some of the pit stops. They have even been looking at redesigning the wheel nut to use less threads, thinking that perhaps that might be a problem. They were looking at some of the other teams comparing their wheel nuts with, say, for example, Ferrari, who does indeed use less threads, thinking that that might be the problem. But as we just saw moments ago, they have not solved their problem. And as we also saw moments ago, Alessandro Nannini is taking a few of these corners a little on the wide side.
And Nannini is still obviously pushing very hard there. Senna's closed the gap a little bit, but he's still hardly all over that Benetton. Perhaps worth a while just to reflect at some of the activities down the rest of the field. We've got Nannini in the lead, Senna in second place, Berger third, Prost is fourth. And
Prost is quite a ways back because it's just that second or so between Senna and Nannini, then about 6 seconds back to Berger. Alain Prost is another 16 seconds back. Then Riccardo Patrese is another 10 seconds back behind him. Terry Boutsen was indeed following right behind Patrese up until that pit stop, but now that he has made his stop, he will drop back in the field just a tad.
Yeah, Boutsen's going to be very annoyed about that. I mean, the last thing you want to have to do is to have another 10 or 15 seconds worth of penalties to try and make up from a slow pit stop, and that was slow.
And here's that little off-course excursion there. You see the sparks flying up, but he's been going wide, and a few moments ago, there you see it, he gets to the point that he's kicking up the dust, and that is the last place you want to be. Yeah, I mean, that looks more spectacular than it really is problematic. The cars are designed, they've got skid blocks underneath, they're designed to take a bit of bashing around. They don't want to do it too much, but that's probably not going to cause any great problem. The problem is getting onto that dirt, and at what point do you begin to lose that traction? Fortunately, he's able to hold on and make it all the way through. Back aboard with Derek Warwick as he continues about 2/3 of the way through the German Grand Prix. Very quickly, despite the accident on the first lap, there was no delay, and we mentioned before, this is a fast circuit. It is one of the 3 fastest circuits that the Formula One world will go through all day.
Something that we've just seen is that Terry Boutsen, back on the track now, running in 9th place, has set a new fastest race lap of 45.6, at least half a second under anything that's yet come. So clearly, Boutsen has very much got the bit between his teeth there. Let's just hope, for his sake, that in being clearly pretty aggressive, he's not taking valuable life out of those tyres earlier on, that he may end up regretting later on. Back with the leader, back with Nannini. Senna still very much in the tow there, and as the race is shaping up, with 32 laps gone out of 45, there's a pretty disgruntled looking PK walking back. He's not impressed. It's been disappointing for him. He was really looking in for a very good result there.
It was 1978, in fact, where Nelson Piquet had his very first Grand Prix in an Ensign. So, and he's won this race 3 times. So, although he has no special fondness for the track, it's so far over the years been very good for him, but not today.
No, that was particularly sad there for Piquet. There's Leto moving out of the way neatly for Nannini to come through. Senna's still there. And as I say, we've with two-thirds distance now, and really the big question marks have got to be, we're looking at either a Benetton, this way very unfortunate, a Benetton or a McLaren win here, and who really has been smart between the two sets of C's or the one set of B's on these cars? The cars themselves look pretty closely matched.
Very much so. Let's go down to John Bisignano.
Steve Medincia with now Benetton Formula team coordinator. What's the situation out on the track? Your driver is, of course, leading the fabulous new Ford V8's doing very well down these long straightaways. Are they going to risk bringing him in at this late stage?
Everything's running according to plan, and obviously we feel the pressure behind us, but there's no plans to bring him in at all. We're just going to run it straight on out and take it right into victory circle, hopefully.
The team chose to go out on the harder compound B tire. There's only a few laps to go, 15, 12 laps to go. Will it be able to hold up these latter laps as far as performance-wise, or is it going to get eaten up here?
Sandro's called in, and he thinks he can go the rest of the distance, so...
Well, he's the man that knows.
It's his call.
A lot of smiling faces down here in the Benetton pits.
I think we're seeing Senna now. Nannini's now working hard. Senna is going to go by, I think. Nannini's had his very strong performance, very decisively swept back to the right, Senna, taking the line for that third chicane. It'll be interesting to see just whether Nannini was holding Senna up, or now that Senna's got some clear road, can he pull ahead and take advantage of that second set of tyres that he's got? A rip-off. Did you see that left hand come out of Senna? They have thin films of cellophane across the front of the visor, normally 2 sheets, which they can pull off at an opportune moment. And there was no point of Senna pulling off that rip-off whilst he was following Nannini, because every engine throws out a little bit of oil and a little bit of muck and stuff from behind the car. But once he's ahead, he's got some clear road now, hopefully for the last 12 laps of this race, and Senna wants to take full advantage of having a clear visor for that amount of time. If we look down the field, some interesting things now are beginning to show up. In 6th place, we've had Ivan Capelli in 6th place there, once again getting the march up into getting the Leighton House car up into the points. We've also got the 2 LaRousse cars driven by Suzuki and Bernard.
And then we see a replay of the pass. Very simple, didn't dog him at all, just simply came up. And it's interesting, once again, he's been sitting back there for so long, and for so long the rap against Ayrton Senna was that he was a little too emotional and a little too quick to jump at an opportunity, whether it was there or not. In this particular situation, he seemed content to sit back there, bide his time until, for whatever reason, he felt it was the time, the moment to go, and he went ahead in a perfectly safe location with no traffic around him, made the move, took back the lead, and is now continuing to lead here at the German Grand Prix. Let's give you our standings as we've got them right now. Ayrton Senna continuing to lead. Alessandro Nannini now just about a second or so back. Gerhard Berger, the other McLaren, is about 6 seconds behind. And then Alain Prost is continuing on, the only Ferrari left, in about 4th position, 20 seconds back. We'll be back. And Ayrton Senna leads here in Germany after having sat behind Alessandro Nannini for some time. Now he is not only taking the lead back, he's running away with it. He has been slowly but surely stretching out the lead. Initially it was just a second or so. Now it's a little over 2 seconds. Just enough that he's making his point known, that he is taking control of this race. And frankly, unless something happens, it seems very unlikely he's going to let it go.
No, I think that's right, Rick. I think Senna is now... He should be okay. I mean, Nannini was not too far behind there. That's Mike Cranafus, Ford Motorsport director there. We can see in the inset. They're coming out onto the long straight now up to the first chicane. That's worthwhile considering. Just think about the braking performances of these cars. As these guys approach 200 miles an hour, they're going to be getting hard on the brakes. They're going to be going down to 50 miles an hour, and that's going to take them, as I say, just 3 seconds to lose that amount of speed. 3 seconds and 3.5 G. Accelerating hard now. Your car at home may do 0 to 50 miles an hour in 7 or 8 seconds. These cars do 0 to 150 miles an hour in 7 or 8 seconds. That's the sort of performance we're talking about. And into the second chicane there. Through the second chicane for Senna.
11 cars out of the race at this point. Only 15 cars remaining in this battle to the end with about 9 laps. And there we try to go aboard with Derek Warwick. Sometimes the pictures don't quite work as well as we'd like.
And find that out of that third chicane wants to get into fifth gear, and you see just above his gear lever hand, when he changes gear again, there's a little round knob. That's to change the brake balance, and he may well have been doing that as the fuel load lightens to keep the front and rear wheels braking equally. To balance the throttle through that series of corners. It's not a question of just coming in, jamming on the brakes and flooring it again. He's got to balance the amount of grip he's got left. We just heard the chink as he went over the curb on the exit there. And you can see that his rev counter too, rather than being a round dial, don't bother looking for it, it's not there. What he has got is that strip, that green strip you see. It's an LCD rev counter. It probably begins at something like 8,000 revs, and it just spans from 8,000 perhaps to 14. And that's what he's going to be using.
Back to the front, Ayrton Senna leading this race, the German Grand Prix, with just about 8 laps to go. His lead now over Alessandro Nannini has stretched out to about 4 seconds. It looks like there will be a battle developing between Nannini and Berger in just a few moments. Let's go down to John Bisignano with an update on the Pirro situation.
Rick, we have some good news on Emmanuel Pirro. He has been treated here at the track, and they've taken him away in ambulance. They haven't used the helicopter, which means that he's not in any life-threatening situation whatsoever. He's in very good shape, except complaining of severe neck pains. They've taken him into the Heidelberg University Hospital, one of the best hospitals in all of Europe, for some very sophisticated x-rays. And he should be back at the track, hopefully, before the truck pulls out of here. They're going to check him out and send him back here as soon as possible. But he is, at this moment, reported in excellent condition.
Didn't see Derek Warwick with the leader, Ayrton Senna, coming up behind.
Yeah, well, it'd be nice now if we could have a look at Derek from the in-car. We might be able to see just what it's like being there, and here we go. Now, Warwick now will know that he's got Senna behind him. Warwick will know that. He can't do anything about it at the moment. He doesn't want to hold Senna up, but he's just getting on with his own race, minding his own business. And he won't mind either here. I don't think Senna can come by here. But what we can, there he is, he checks his mirrors, he registers where Senna is, and he'll do the same on the next straight. But this time we'll see what the relative speed difference of that McLaren-Honda and the Lotus Lamborghini is. Let's have a look. The blue flag went out. So are we going to see a McLaren come by on the right? And there it goes. Look how close. He's just 5 or 6 feet behind at that point.
Ooh, look at that. And then, well, I guess it looks like Derek Warwick was already beginning his braking, whereas Senna was starting his braking a little later. First, it looked like he was starting to pull away.
Yeah, actually what happened there was that Senna braked a little bit later, or Warwick braked a little bit earlier to give Senna some space through that corner. And you can see what the performance differential is like between these cars.
Warwick right now sitting in the 8th position on this track. He is talked about the fact that he has been taking a lot more risk of late because he just feels that the car is not doing what he feels the car should be able to do, and as a result, it's his responsibility to try to accomplish something. And he talked about the fact that in both qualifying sessions, on Friday and on Saturday, he was taking risks. We sat there and watched him during the qualifying session on Saturday, doing things that he said he wouldn't ordinarily do because he feels he really doesn't have much of a choice.
No, Lotus have got a particular problem making those qualifiers work for the lap, even more than other people, and that's really been quite a problem for them in qualifying.
And Lotus, a lot of rumors going around that the team is on the verge of being sold. So a lot of, and also this concern today, they may be losing their sponsor. A lot of concern. There you see Gerhard Berger getting by Jean Alesi. We'll be back in just a few moments for the final 7 laps or so from Hockenheim. Don't go away. Goodyear uses nitrogen in the tires rather than filling them up with regular air or oxygen. They use nitrogen because, frankly, it's a little more stable. It does not have any moisture content in it. They're concerned that they pump in air, even purified air. There's always that small amount of moisture in it. The moisture can affect the actual pressure within the tire, and they have to be right on with the pressure. They can't have a window of more than, say, 2 pounds in the front or the rear tires. And by using nitrogen, it's stable. There's no problems like oxygen might have a problem with exploding. This is simply a pure, stable source that doesn't have that moisture content. And there we see John Alesi beginning to slow down.
Yeah, it looks like Alesi has a problem there. He's been running in 9th place so far, but it looks like he's on the way out now. So it's still Senna pulling away now from Nannini in 2nd place, with Berger now trying very hard to close the gap. He's just got 4 laps to do it. He's 4 seconds behind, and there's no doubt that both McLaren and Berger would dearly love that 1-2. We've also got Boutsen up now in 6th place behind Patrese in the other Williams car, with also Derek Warwick inside the top 10 in the Lotus Lamborghini, with Ivan Capelli there too in 7th place in his Leighton House car. We've lost the LaRousse Lamborghini cars of Suzuki and Bernard, which have been running in good form at Silverstone. Those cars were in fact 4th and 6th place at Silverstone to score points, but for some reason have dropped out of a top 10 place, both cars, in the last few laps. Rounding off the top 10, there's Caffey in the first of the Arrows cars, and Arrows are the manufacturer, or the chassis manufacturer, who are due to get the new Porsche V12 that's making its Formula One debut next year.
And you have to think that the Ford people have got to be very excited with Nannini's performance today, because it is more than just a case of trying to hold on with the tire game. It's actually having the power to stick with it. Let's go down to John Visigliano. We've got Alain in the pits.
John Alain moving very slowly because he's coasting, no engine noise whatsoever on this blue and white material. The team goes to work on the tires in somewhat of a futile approach to service the young French driver. He's undone the seat belts, and Joanne, the team manager, is now signaling him to come out of the cars. Jean Alesi, who has really set the Formula One circus on fire this year as far as being the strongest of the young lions out of the German Grand Prix.
About 4 laps to go right now as Ayrton Senna goes across the line. By the way, you might notice that there's no cigarette advertisement on the cars here in Germany. They're very strict about that, and as a result, a lot of the cigarette manufacturers have to remove their insignias from the cars, and there we've got a problem with J.J. Leto's car.
Yeah, he's got the rear bodywork. That's the bodywork covering the engine there, but it's obviously worked loose. It's flapping around. It's going to catch the air. It's probably not going to upset the car a great deal, and I'd imagine he's going to carry on in that configuration, particularly with only 3 laps to go.
The only concern is could the air get caught underneath and actually blow that cowling back?
Well, that's a possibility, but I think a risk that I'd certainly be prepared to take is unlikely to do too much to the car, because the glass fibre of that would just tear off with the phenomenal aerodynamic forces that would actually occur.
Yeah, but what the risk behind them?
Yeah, I don't think that's too much of a problem. It'll just sail away in the air like a big glider for a little bit. But what's going to be interesting now is really, can Berger make any impression on that second place Nannini? And I don't think he can. I mean, it really is not looking as if he's going to do it. He's only got 3 laps to make up 4 seconds, and they've both completed the last lap within a lap time of within 1/100th of a second. They really are incredibly closely matched at the moment.
Not only that, but Senna's continuing to stretch out his lead. It's now to about 7 seconds over Nannini, but the distance between Nannini and Berger is about the same. So as you pointed out, their lap times are so identical, they're running almost in tandem, although they are about 4 seconds apart. And then another 31 seconds back, a man we haven't talked about too much today, is Alain Prost, and he is sitting in the 4th place, followed by Riccardo Patrese, about 5 seconds back behind Alain Prost, and then Terry Boutsen, who is now 33 seconds back by virtue of the long pit stop. Now, interesting to point out, with about 3 laps or so to go, as disappointed, 2 laps at this point to go, as disappointing as a 4th place finish would be for Alain Prost, it's also important that he's going to get those points, and right now he needs that.
Well, that's right. It's important for Prost to get those points. He's leading the championship, but he won't be leading it after this race if the current positions stand, because Senna's going to get 9. Prost, for his 4th place, is going to get 3 points. Prost was only 2 ahead, so that will put Senna 4 ahead, much to his relief. But more significantly, and that's a cloud of smoke. Did we just see that out of the back out of the Leighton House car of Capelli in 7th place? He may not make it to the finish. But more importantly, and I think significantly, Prost was confident of his car's performance. We saw that. But clearly, he's now 32 seconds behind Berger in 3rd spot, and there's no way that this can be called anything like a good level of performance for Ferrari. So there's going to be a lot of head-scratching back down in Maranello at the end of this race to try and see why they were so far off the pace on a track which is supposed to be very good for high-performance engines. Ferrari, of course, have got their semi-automatic 7-speed gearbox with the electronic control on the steering wheel, the sort of thing that really should aid straight line performance by getting that last tenth of a second out of acceleration. The combination of that V12 and that gearbox and the talents of Prost don't seem to have done the job, so there'll be a lot of questions as to why. And there we've got Berger. He's still behind that Ligier there of Larini. He's got to get by that to get a clear run. No, he's not going to do it. Now that really was the last chance he had of getting on terms with Nannini for the flag.
So this will slow him down through that section. John, I understand you're down there with a question.
Dr. Palmer, I wanted to ask you, is not it the fact that McLaren has actually gotten faster, Ferrari hasn't gotten slower? They're so dominant. Are they the best team you've ever driven for, ever been associated with?
There's no doubt that McLaren are the best team that I've been associated with. I do a lot of testing with them. I'm going over to Japan next week running with them, and I should be running the V12 Honda engine, the engine that Honda have brought out in retaliation to Ferrari's increased level of performance. I should be running that at Monza in the middle of August.
What is it like? Last year you drove the Tyrrell. For those of us who have never sat in that cockpit, how is it so different than every other race car on the track?
It's the way that the whole package comes together. You know, the way that the McLaren go about developing and running their race team, they look a long way ahead. If there's anything they can do to make those cars perform better for longer, they will do it. They do not start with a budget and see what that will buy them. They start with what they need, and then they go and find the budget to do that. And that's a very fundamental and a very fortunate way in which McLaren can operate. Senna now, on his last lap, he's going to be very relieved. We've had 3 Grand Prix with Prost taking the honours for Ferrari. Senna really desperately wants that World Championship. McLaren, Ron Dennis's McLaren 2, will be pleased that this time Senna can be under no doubt that the McLaren is the car of the race, the car of the present period of Grand Prix, because Dennis is trying to persuade Senna to sign for another 2 or 3 year contract. And of course, the stronger that Dennis's hand is, the better the McLaren goes, the stronger that Dennis's hand will be.
As they enter the stadium complex, this is it, the last few turns for Ayrton Senna. By the way, with this victory, it will be number 24, and that will tie him with the great Juan Manuel Fangio with 24 victories.
Yes, I believe that Senna here, watching him take his 24th, he's just coming around to take his 24th Grand Prix victory, really is, I think, the fastest Formula One driver there's ever been. And there he goes, raising his arm in absolute joy. He's thrilled to take that Grand Prix victory to put him back at the head of the World Championship table.
And the important thing to point out, too, there's got to be a level of relief with Senna, knowing that the team has risen to the challenge. The fact that, as you mentioned, Ferrari had created the challenge as Derek Warwick going across the finish line. Ferrari had created the challenge, and yet McLaren was able to live up to it.
Well, yes, that certainly is true in the hands of Senna. Nannini backed off quite considerably on that last lap, but not so much that he managed to retain that second place, but Berger closed up to within 2 seconds. Berger still pushing hard, just in case Nannini could go off and make some silly mistake.
So you see Prost finishing. There's also Riccardo Patrese right behind him. That is the race. We'll be back with more, though, from Hockenheim after this. It's after completing the Grand Prix of Germany. Ayrton Senna getting his 24th victory of his career. Alessandro Nannini, you see him there off to the right. He managed to finish second in a very fine performance with that new Ford engine. Gerhard Berger in third. Alain Prost, a very quiet day for him, 36 seconds back behind Berger, followed by Riccardo Patrese and Thierry Boots. And both the Williams cars, once again, fairly uneventful days, but finishing in the points with 5th and 6th positions. And that has to be a good feeling for the teams.
Yeah, I think out of that top 6 there, we're going to have 2 guys who are going to be pleased with their day's work, and that's Senna and Nannini. Berger's going to be disappointed that he wasn't right up there with Senna. Prost is going to be disappointed at the level of performance of his Ferrari. And there's no doubt that the Williams team, too, will realise that there's still a lot of work to be done for them with their V10 Renault engine Grand Prix car, with Patrese and Boots really never in contention. This was, though, a particularly important Grand Prix for McLaren. The last 3 Grand Prix, as we said, have been won by Prost and the Ferrari, and had Ferrari gone on to win this one too, it really probably would have put a vast amount of pressure on McLaren. Fortunately, though, not only has Senna won, he's done so in pretty emphatic form, certainly as far as Ferrari are concerned, which means that we really are in for a fantastic second half to the World Championship Grand Prix season.
Especially with Nigel Mansell yesterday talking about the fact that this is one of those circuits, while they're competing, they don't feel they have the edge, unlike some other circuits like Estoril, Australia, Spain, where they think they are going to be able to come in there and actually be able to go at it. We also should explain why these gentlemen are walking back. They simply don't feel the need to go complete one more long lap.
Well, this is it. You've got a long circuit lap here. We've said it's 4 miles. But don't forget, too, that, these cars want to run. They want to start this race with the minimum amount of fuel on. And if the team crew have got to put on sufficient fuel to do another whole lap, that's going to take perhaps 1/10 or half a tenth of a second a lap, and it all adds up. And in an ideal world, the cars will stop just, pretty soon after the finish line. Now, I suspect they've actually got the Parc Fermé, which is the area, the compound that the cars are cordoned into on completion of the Grand Prix, so that they can be scrutinized and checked for the various parameters that are important, the weight, the wings, the engine size. They will have done that, and so they are now walking back to the rostrum for the presentation.
As they walk back, we will come back in just a moment and look at the point situation. But here's the view of Germany at Hockenheim. Senna having won today's race. Well, everybody expected the McLaren victory. I think a lot of people were surprised about the performance of Alessandro Nannini in this particular race. John Bisignano down the pits, a few final comments.
Well, the pits are getting a little crowded down here. Some of the more brave people who are ready to impale themselves on fences have made their way into the pit lane. There are just as many Ferrari fans and flags as there are Brazilian flags as the winners take the podium. One thing I want to throw out here is in 2 weeks from today, the Hungaroring will be the venue in Formula One, located in Budapest. And that is one of the slowest circuits on the Formula One Grand Prix Championship trail. The cars that ran so fast here are going to have to be much more nimble, much more controlled, and more emphasis put on aerodynamics with a lot of downforce instead of straight line speed. So the championship's not over. Everything changes for next weekend, and I wouldn't miss on ESPN the Hungarian Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time. We will be there.
We look forward to seeing you there. And let's talk about the point situation. There you see the man who is now leading the points. He now has 48 points ahead by 4 points of Alain Prost, who was leading coming into this race. Gerhard Berger continues to hold his third spot with 29. Nelson Piquet, having dropped out of this race, still has 18 points. Terry Boutsen has 18. And then there are 3 men tied. Jean Alesi, Nigel Mansell, and Alessandro Nannini all tied with 13 points apiece. In the situation with the Manufacturers' Championship, McLaren now has a sizable lead over Ferrari, Benetton, Williams behind. Dr. Palmer, one final thought from you.
Well, clearly this result has put McLaren very much back in contention on the World Championship. But what's going to be interesting over the next 2 weeks is not just how McLaren and Ferrari prepare their cars, but what goes on in the driver movement stakes, because Senna's got to make up his mind up about McLaren, and the Williams drivers have also yet to be chosen. Whilst, of course, there's now a vacant seat at Ferrari, now that Mansell has decided to go. There's an awful lot of seat changing to go on, and it's going to be anybody's guess just how it all works out. It's going to be fascinating.
And everybody seems to say that the man on the top there is the key domino on all this. They can't do a whole lot until they find out what his decision is going to be as to where he wants to be.
As you said, Mr. Senna's king.
And here he is holding his trophy for the final day. That is all from the Grand Prix of Germany. It was a pleasure being here. In 2 weeks, Bob Varsha, David Hobbs, and John Bisignano will be in Budapest in Hungary for the Grand Prix there on August 12th. Well, that was a great race. Hope you enjoyed it all. I'll be back in the stateside tomorrow. Dr. Palmer will be back testing for McLaren. We enjoyed it all this weekend. Hope you enjoyed it as well. That's all from Germany.